We now move to discussing the technology context of an headless commerce implementation. So these are the main areas that we need to think of while moving to a headless architecture. First is scalability. Create a microservices-based, scalable, and agile architecture where new services can be easily integrated to accommodate the future growth of the website. Deployment architecture also needs to be considered so that the storefront can scale and grow to multiple servers as the volume and the conversion increases on the website. Next is the speed. Headless architectures will enable much faster page loads for end customers based on the nature of its front-end architecture than compared to traditional theme-based front ends. However, we also need to consider the speed of deploying new features and content to customers, as that is very important for the website marketing team so that they can put out new releases, new features, new content out to the customers to improve the conversion of the website. Flexibility. Keep the architecture flexible through a microservices approach. And with a headless CMS for quick, efficient content management, platforms like Contentful will provide an API-first approach to content management, as well as a commerce platform like Kibo will allow an API-first approach to commerce services. And also, because of the microservices approach, it's easy to integrate third-party services to improve, like search or Google Maps or any other personalization services can be easily integrated into the architecture. Localization. In case of multi-local websites, we need to consider a CMS like Contentful, which will enable easy definition and rendering of content in multiple languages, where the marketing team can define a content once and then define it in multiple languages so that it can be rendered across different locales of your website. Content operations. Efficient workflow for the web marketing team for content modeling, definition, approval, preview, and then publish to the website. A headless CMS like Contentful will enable all this and more that will give power to the web marketing team to control the content and the look and feel of the site as per their marketing needs. So solution overview. As you can see, the biggest change from your legacy commerce footprint is the decoupling of the front end from the back end. The front end framework will generate the web pages dynamically using the services through an API layer and deliver the pages in a cached manner to the end user. We will delve into the components of the front end architecture in the next slide. The front end uses the APIs of the commerce platform for core commerce services, such as products, categories, cart, checkout, and so on. Similarly, for content, it uses the content platform for all site content across all the pages. The front end will also integrate into third-party web services, such as analytics, digital asset management tools, product reviews, personalization, and Google Analytics, and so on. The second biggest change your commerce team, especially the marketing team, will experience is the content workflow and governance that is baked into this solution. It is a change from your previous experience. Content changes can happen without developer intervention, and therefore site changes can happen much quicker than before. Obviously, for us to go to platforms for content and commerce are Contentful and Kibo respectively, but we'll talk about them in a bit. First, let us tackle the architectural considerations for the front end.
So before you go there, we have questions for both Kibo and Contentful. Blake, why is an API first strategy for the commerce platform so important for an optimal headless commerce solution?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think, even on that last slide, you kind of see a lot of the different components that the commerce platform is responsible for: products and pricing and promotions, and some situations, search, et cetera. Right. And so, I think as this move from a traditional commerce platform that we talked about in the beginning has kind of swung over to a stronger desire for headless, we see even non-API first platforms positioning some form of headless offering, right? And so the importance between API first is that, the whole platform is available through API. I think when you think about a non-API first platform, they allow you to do maybe the standard things that you would like to do with content. They've built the APIs on top of the solution, but there's inherent limitations. The platform wasn't built to be headless. It was built to use its own head, and they've added on APIs later to try to service those needs. So, probably 80 to 90% of the use cases, it will work just fine. But you would want an API first platform to truly be headless because it's built to access any part of the platform through the API. And so at Kibo, the whole platform is API first. So the front end aspects that you might call and get products, but actually even our own administrative console is built on top of the same API. And so what we say is that we eat our own dog food, right? What we're building and what we're making, we use the same API. We don't have a secret way around the system to do something else. And that's important because when you get into your more business specific use cases, you're going to want to be able to access something through API. And if the platform's not API first, that might not be available through API, or it might not be available through a performant API that can perform how you'd expect on the front end. And so a platform that has been API first from day one is crucial to gaining all of those benefits that we talked about: the performance and the modularity and the composability. Those things you have to have an API first platform, not just a platform that has built an API to be headless.
Thanks, Blake. And I'll ask a somewhat related question to Nick as well, related and relevant. Why is the separation of content from the backend commerce platform a critical component of the headless commerce solution?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'll start by saying I love everything Blake had to say, and I think that dovetails really well into this conversation because we're in the same boat. We've been API first from day one. Our web app is built on top of all the same APIs that our users have access to. And, I think that's what allows us to integrate so tightly when we work together, right? And so, getting to your question, Rajiv, I think two main things come to mind for me here: security and user experience. And so, odds are your commerce platform is going to contain a lot of business critical data. For me, it's things like SKUs, pricing information, inventory counts, like products that may not be publicly available, things like that. I'm sure Blake has a much longer list, but you get the idea, and those are things that should really only be accessible to users who are a critical part of day-to-day commerce operations. And that was even, that was what that chart showed. It had distinct user groups kind of in each tool. But I think there's also a little bit of a blurry line there between the two because, we are API first platforms. There's a lot of opportunity to integrate those to create a really good user experience for all of those groups of users across the platforms so that they can, access bits and pieces of content without, having to create maybe an entire governance structure in one platform to accommodate a really small use case. And so, on the Contentful side, we make it really simple to integrate your commerce platform. I talk about that direction because that's the side that I sit on, but we certainly see commerce platforms, including content on their side as well. And that allows content authors to do things like select products from their catalog in the Contentful interface to include in content. Maybe you think about a promo landing page where you want to have a slider of featured products. You don't want to have to go all the way over to your commerce platform to do that. You just want to be able to pull that data directly in. And we could go on and on about those use cases, but I think those are really the two things at the core of it for me is, we go back to that speed and agility. We want to keep things secure and we want to create an ideal user experience for our content creators so that they can create an ideal user experience for our end consumers.
And if I could just add to that, I think something that's pretty important and something that you guys do great at Ignitiv is, when you get to highly flexible API first platforms, there's a need for governance to say, okay, what do I do in the commerce platform? Maybe I can do some things that exist in the CMS. And what do I do in the CMS? Maybe I could do some things that exist in the commerce platform. But that conversation to help an organization and guide them through, hey, here's how you should think about bringing these systems together, is equally as important to even just picking the right systems to bring together. And so I think that's what somebody like Ignitiv, you guys can do well, is you can bring the business side that we talked about, but also the technology side to help them understand the long-term implications and limitations of those decisions.
Yeah, and from our perspective as a integrator, what we look to do is to bring the best of breed component services, if you may, from across the platforms and weave that together on the front end.
Yep.
Okay. So let's delve into the front end architecture considerations. So there are 6 points, 6 high-level areas that we typically have to consider for a headless front-end architecture. First is cloud deployment. Second is a flexible microservices-based integration, integrated front-end. Build out reusable visual components so that we can, churn out the web pages in a quicker and a cleaner manner. Finalize on a storefront architecture that works for your organization. And we'll delve a little bit into that later. Cookies and caching that will enable faster page load and enable session data across your pages, as well as redirects, what your URL path should be, redirects, and SEO strategy, especially if you're doing this front-end architecture migration in a phased manner. And we'll touch a little bit of that also in the implementation sections. So to give an example on a storefront architecture that works, one of our clients wanted the leanest possible approach for a very fast page load and wanted to use HTML plus plain JavaScript plus a library of web components without using any popular frameworks like React or Angular or something like that. With that, they wanted the lightest load possible for each of their pages. A key promise of moving to a headless architecture is the possibility of using cookies, caching the pages, using local storage of the browser to download all the static content so that when a visitor comes for a second time, that page loads very fast for him. And only the dynamic components of the page are rendered through APIs, as we saw in the architecture section. Given the emphasis search engines nowadays place on page load performance, this becomes extremely important, especially with a phased release approach and even otherwise. You will need to address issues around URL paths, redirects, and your SEO strategy. If you plan your front end properly to use what we call reusable visual components, we can have like a quicker, a leaner storefront with more consistent look and feel across your multiple pages. How you integrate to the platform services like such as commerce and content and other services such as analytics, search, DAM, and which APIs you use will shape the quality of experience you create for your customers. So not all commerce and content APIs are same. If you're indeed looking to select either of any core platform, it's important to explore the API properly. And one of the guiding questions could be, was it an API first architecture from day one when the product was released to the market? Or was API like a second thought once the product was built and the APIs were built later to support the product? The final consideration, what we will have is on the cloud environment, what you would consider both for front-end deployment as well as for your CI/CD infrastructure. Are you getting the best infrastructure to ensure performance and scalability? Is it in line with your enterprise standards?
Okay, so on to questions for Blake and Nick. we've touched upon API first. If there are any further thoughts on that, but any areas that Deepak might perhaps not have touched upon or given importance to on the front end architecture. So let's go by turns. Nick, if you can go first.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. I mean, I think after the last section, we both know where Blake and I stand on API first and how important that is to our platform. So I won't elaborate on that too much. But one thing I wanted to touch on that comes up a lot for us, just in regards to user experience and kind of putting a lot of control of the front end in the user's hands, is reusable visual components. Like I like that you mentioned that in the context of performance, because like 100%, like your front end is going to be more performant when you're using fewer things. That's just how it works, right? But I think like when you can align those visual components with really tightly curated content structures, maybe with some like design control that aligns with brand conventions in your contentful content model, then you get a really nice combination of that performant, easy to use, consistent front end with a really simple management experience for that, where you can give your users the flexibility to put those reusable components where they might need to, possibly incorporate some commerce stuff depending on the integrations you have in place, and build out exactly the pages they need. Again, really quickly, they can iterate on those as things change without having to, create a whole development cycle just to be able to push those changes out.
Yeah, I was keenly interested in Nick's answer, because I think this is probably even much more in the front end wheelhouse of Contentful. But I would say the interesting thing is the back end does have a pretty big impact on this, right? We've talked about API first, and we talked about the meaning of headless, right? But what we see is, and I think Deepak, you referenced this, the level of capabilities that your backend commerce service has a pretty big impact to the actual performance on the website. So if you have to call and get product or discount information and then perform custom JavaScript or things on the front end in order to make something happen to create the desired user experience, you can sometimes even take a step backwards versus a step forward, because your commerce platform doesn't have the capabilities or is not returning the information you need in one API call. So you have to make 3, and then you have to parse that data together. It can really have an impact on the performance and ultimately the front end experience, even though it's more of a back end system. And so, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you, Blake. Yeah.
Okay.
Continue. Yeah.
So I was going to say, like, one of our customers, a great example is they went out to look for a headless commerce platform, and they looked at us and 2 of the probably other well-known leaders. I won't name names here, but what they found, and they were a pretty highly complex furniture business. And so they had products and product bundles, and you can really configure a piece of furniture in ways that you had no idea that you could. And they have a lot of product data and pricing structures and parts and all these different things that go together to make collections and bundles. And so what they found when they looked at the APIs, because if you're buying a headless commerce platform, you're just saying, what does this API do? What does this API do? What does this API do? What kind of capabilities does it have? That they were going to have to customize very little on our platform versus some of these other platforms. And so that was what actually made quite a bit of difference in their page load speed and the performance of the site. Is instead of having to call multiple APIs or build custom applications on the front end or something in between the front end and the back end to manipulate the data, they were able to just make it in one call, get product, and got everything that they needed. So this is the technical session, so we're allowed to go a little bit more technical, but I think that's a great example of the capabilities of the services that you choose are very important. Not all backend commerce platforms are created the same or have the same functionality or even operate in the same verticals.
And I like that you put some concrete terms around like why it matters that a platform has been API first since the beginning. Because I think you do that a lot, but that's a really solid example of just like the types of things that you see in implementation where, it's really the differentiator between, platforms like ours and others who might be like bolting those things on. Yeah. And the other thing that is quite interesting is with these flexible platforms, if a platform doesn't do it, there's probably a way to do it, right? Yeah, we don't have that capability, but we can build it, we can modify it.
So there's performance implications of that, but there's also management implications of that. Do you really want to build all of these custom applications to handle product types that the commerce platform can't handle, or discount types that the commerce platform can't handle? Now you're managing, maintaining, and responsible for the performance of all of these custom applications, and you're getting away from the benefits of this kind of best in breed composable approach, and it's going back into kind of an in-house approach. Which can be, in some ways that's good, but in some ways that can be very dangerous or very costly and expensive in the long run.
Yep.
So the next we will address what should be the platform components. There are around 4 categories of platforms that you need to look at that we have put on this slide. We will get to the commerce and content in a minute, but let us talk about the front end for now. You could potentially look at commercial front end frameworks such as BSF, but for many customers looking to address their growth meaningfully and wanting to control their customer experience destiny, we advocate control over the front end with a custom framework using tools such as React or Vue, or even the example that we covered in the previous slide, where one of our clients wanted to go with his own custom architecture without using any popular front-end frameworks. For Kibo customers, Kibo has open source storefront starter kits that can be used to jumpstart the front-end development process as well. To host the front-end as well as to maintain the CI/CD process, we will need to select a proper cloud platform. And we have seen and worked with AWS, GCP, and Azure, and all work fairly well. All have all the front-end architecture components that we talked about in different forms, but they're all available on all the platforms. In the previous section, we have talked about how not all core commerce or content APIs are same. So how Kibo as commerce platform and Contentful as the content platform are architected ensures that they can address the needs of most B2C enterprise organizations in a very comprehensive manner. So we'll have Kibo and Contentful also speak to that platform for a few minutes as well.
Yeah, I can start us. I think I'm interested in, Nick, your perspective on this as well, but I think what we've seen as kind of, if you talk about the evolution of headless, is it kind of started mostly at kind of the enterprise or the highly tech forward organizations. And in recent years, it's pushing its way down to the broader, and at least my approach, my focus is the e-commerce space, right? The commerce space, it's kind of worked its way down. But there's from our perspective, it's kind of in some ways leaving out the marketer, right? A lot of the organizations we talk to, the marketing team knows they want more control over the website, but they know they're supposed to want to go headless. They think they might know a little bit about what it is, but there's still some confusion of what it is. And then they have everything in one system today. So then when they start to decouple, they realize, well, hold on, like now they're in different systems, but I used to manage it all over here, and now I have to do this. And so there's what we found is that it can be actually highly complex for these medium-sized organizations who maybe don't have a large in-house development team, or as you break apart a system into 15 different composable systems, you need to have expertise and knowledge internally to know exactly how to do that and do that well and structure it well so it works for the long run. So our approach, and I like that this slide, of course I like this, that it says we're ranked #1 on the Forrester Wave. Our approach here, and what we see resonating very well in the market, is how can we kind of meet that mid-market as the growth in headless explodes, right? And so what we've done is we've tried to provide integrations to some of the leading content management systems, Contentful being one, because that is a key aspect to this. What if we can make that turnkey, where you don't have to go architect and build that, but we got together with the Contentful folks and said, this is what makes sense. Let's build it so people can just plug it and turn it on. And we've gone ahead and built storefronts. And Deepak, you referenced this. We have Vue Storefront, React Storefront, Next.js Commerce, which are great. We would encourage you to use those, but we actually find that they're quite simplistic. if you're going to be a storefront for 15 different commerce platforms, you have to kind of play lowest common denominator, right? Most basic functionality, simple products, simple cart, simple checkout. And most of the businesses that we face aren't that simple, right? And so what we've done is actually built our own React and Vue front ends that are built around omni-channel retailer use cases, built around complex use cases, complex pricing and product and discount and customer segments and buy online, pick up in store, these complex use cases. So again, it's kind of a starter kit. You can grab it off of GitHub and take it from there and modify it, tweak it to meet your business. So you're welcome to build a custom front end, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And we also offer custom B2B React and Vue storefronts as well that are B2B focused around account pricing and segments and roles and permissions, et cetera. So the idea here is, how can we meet kind of these medium-sized organizations? Because a comment that actually a retailer doing $200 million online said to me is, we don't want to go headless. We don't have 15 developers on staff, right? That was their perception of headless. We have to have 15 developers to even consider it. And those types of folks, they don't quite understand that there's things that platforms like Kibo and Contentful are doing to make it easier and faster, to make it more turnkey, to have all of the benefits of headless, but without all of the headache. What if you can get the faster performance and page load speed, a modular composable architecture, but you don't have to have 15 developers in-house, right? And so from a roadmap perspective, that's where we are focused as an organization, is how can we continue to provide tools and things to help mid-sized retailers or organizations that don't have a huge development or IT staff to be able to build and architect and maintain this? How can we help them get the benefits without all of the cost?
Yeah, I really like all of that, and I think like what particularly resonated with me, just because we talk about it a ton on our side, is just the marketer angle on things, right? Because I think like headless, it's still a relatively new paradigm. A lot of people don't fully understand the implications for what that means for their day-to-day job, and like how that could potentially make things easier, how it changes things. Because at the end of the day, if you're running on a monolith, it's a paradigm shift for your business. But I think like what's amazing about it, and what we together can show our joint customers, is that you can get the best of both worlds, right? Like you can have non-technical content creators and developers kind of coexisting as part of this, we'll just say, composable creators space. I think I like that. It's the first time I've said it, but we'll go with it. And I mean, you kind of get like this combination in Contentful specifically of well-structured content, effective governance, and then a really intuitive interface that makes it easy for content creators to focus on the things that they need to without having to stress out about kind of like all the other stuff that's floating around, which in some cases may even be like, I don't want to screw up all of the like SKU data that's associated with my products. I just want to be able to reference a single product. And that's where, the integrations, like you mentioned, Blake, I think are so clutch, because like, again, you still get the benefits of that composable architecture, but the experience for the non-technical creators still feels easy. I mean, ideally easier, right, than it did before. And, I mean, just like to speak a little more to the technical side too, like, we really, and I know this is the case at Kibo too, like we focus a lot on just like infrastructure and tooling that helps developers like work in a much more efficient workflow, so that even when developers do have to get involved to, maybe like modify a component for their needs or prep something for a campaign, it's a much less painful experience. And, it's something where, again, going back to speed and iteration, like you can get it out quickly, you can test it, you can make sure it works. And then all of a sudden you have this new piece of your toolbox as a non-technical content creator that, you can use moving forward. And again, it just kind of creates the system that builds on itself. And, tech and marketing don't have to kind of exist in opposition in the way they have for so long. They can create this really nice, like cross-functional agile cycle where everybody wins, because, conversion rates are increasing and you're getting stuff to market much more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.